I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am privileged to be recording this vodcast today, the Gimuy Woolabara Yidinji people of the Gimuy, and I would like to recognise their elders past, present and emerging.
Welcome back everybody to another episode of The Growth Distillery. We are shooting on location from Cairns, and I'm here with a man that needs no introduction, Professor Mark Ritson.
Mate, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm good. I've travelled the length of Australia from Tassie to here.
Yeah, to present an idea with bite.
I hope so.
So we're here talking about storytelling. We've had a number of the speakers come in, and I'd love to get your perspective. You know, good or bad or otherwise. How have you seen storytelling change over the last few years?
Look, I think it's one of those eternal things that shouldn't change too much, right? I think that, I'm a relative conservative on sort of change and evolution. And I suspect the techniques of storytelling that worked a century ago are pretty much the same as they are now. I think the one change in marketing storytelling that we're all getting used to now is the idea that maybe a single narrative for everyone is often the best route to take. We went down that avenue of personalization and everyone was going to get their own little story. It turns out, much to everyone's surprise, that's mostly a lot of bollocks. and essentially one great narrative will do the job for all. And that for me has been a fascinating, I didn't expect that, but that's been a fascinating turn of events. So that's probably my main interest at the moment, is particularly digital storytelling. It gave us the ability to send 10 messages to 10 different audiences, but it also gave us the ability to realize that when we test all 10 messages against the 10 different segments, message 4 works best for all 10 segments. And that's a very common experience. So I think a single, powerful, unified story is probably the one size fits all we weren't expecting. And
how do you balance the tension between that continuity of narrative, but so many different touch points from, ironically, long form YouTube, through to 6-second snaps?
I'm a big fan of obviousness. So I think, first of all, there's a couple of caveats, right? With touch points, I found my whole career, marketers tend to invent their touch points. And the ones they think are super important are totally unimportant. And the ones they're not even thinking about are massive, right? So the first point is, even before you get to sort of, how do we stretch that storytelling across the different touch points? For God's sake, check your touch points, right? Because what you think they are ain't what the customer thinks. And they're their touch points, not yours.
Yep.
But with that caveat, I think it's about being as obvious as possible for as long as possible across all touch points. I think we overthink things in our industry. I think we change things too frequently. I'm of the group that now believes wear out doesn't really exist. If you've got a good ad, keep it. And I think, consumers aren't paying that much attention to any media, right? It's relative, of course. Probably the travel section of the Sunday papers is sort of, the zenith of attention.
Yeah.
But the point is, even there, we have a distractible, audience. So for me, it's about obviousness and playing it out across everything as many times as possible. And if there's one thing, again, I've seen throughout my career, it's marketers who grow impatient with the same message, who overthink things, who want to add too much in there. And what they're fundamentally failing to do is realize the story you're telling is aimed at an audience who aren't that interested. The nature of the advertising text in B2B is people that don't really care.
Yeah, it's marketing myopia.
Yeah, it's not cinema, man. I mean, when you buy a cinema ticket, you want to get your money's worth. When we're doing B2B communications, literally the audience is disengaged from the start, right? It's not that they're avoiding ads, it's that their default position was not to pay attention.
So for leaders that are looking to stay true to the core principle, what would be your guidance to them to avoid those tripwires and trapdoors?
So for me, I think, first of all, get your strategy right. So before the story, the bones of the story is your strategy, right? And everyone wanks on about strategy. It's not that complex, right? Who am I actually trying to tell my story to?
Yep.
what are the key points of the story, the position, and what is the objective of this story, right? If you have that skeleton in place, the story then not only can be powerful, but will deliver the goods for you, right?
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, get that right. And the second thing is, I think I've seen in B2B, we overcomplicate the targeting stage. Often you'll find companies are putting the decision-making unit into the segmentation, and that's a huge mistake. You want to do, when you do B2B segmentation, do B2B segmentation. And what I mean by that is segment at the firm level. Yeah, if you're selling hospital equipment, segment at the hospital level. Once you've picked a target or targets, you can then zoom into that particular segment of hospitals and go, now, how do these guys make their decision? Who makes it? Who's in the buying committee and what do they want? Then there's room to start thinking about different storytelling, different messages, ironically, to that same hospital segment account.
I'm going to diverge from storytelling just for a second because you've touched on something and I'm fascinated to get your opinion. Do we have an overfixation on segmentation, and is there actually more that unifies us
I think that's spot on.
than divides us?
I think that's spot on. I think we're a quarter of the way through this century. And I think if I could summarize one of my main learnings over the last 25 years, having seen literally thousands of marketing and brand plans, many of them B2B, we get this segmentation and then it kind of sits there and everyone presents it in their plan and they just move on and it doesn't do anything. It just hangs around. Do you know what I mean? Like, here's my segmentation. Now I'll go back to the rest of my stuff. So I think it's super important to recognize there is a case for sophisticated mass marketing. In B2B, it makes an awful lot of sense. The reason most companies, this is quite a complex story, but the reason most B2B companies don't do sophisticated mass marketing, even though they believe in it, is because they can't afford to do it. And so there's a great paradox here, and I see it all the time. Companies have to segment their market, not because they believe in segmentation, but because they believe in mass marketing, but they can't afford to go after everyone. So then they have to slice
Gotta find
through.
the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, for economic reasons. And so I think that's probably where we are right now. We've overthought segmentation. We've made it super complicated. And it's not really meaningful. I think you're right. They're looking for differences. The one thing I would say to you in B2B that I've seen work with segmentation is, we can disagree on the proportions. Let's go with the Ehrenberg-Bass numbers. But in B2B, 60% of the money is coming from 20% of the accounts. And the minute you know that, if a marketer can identify those 20% of accounts, boom. You know what I mean? That's your value right there. And you can influence the sales force to visit those accounts and not all the accounts. So that's still, for me, one of the great arguments for. I'm not saying they necessarily want different things in these segments, but there are certain accounts that just, buy more shit.
Deliver the food for fodder. All right, back to storytelling. I'd love an example of gold standard storytelling that you've seen recently, something that has just surprised and delighted.
I think, look, in the B2B space, it's very hard because I'm
Doesn't have to be B2B. You can be B2C.
I'd like to criticize the B2B general approach because I think it's pretty poor and it doesn't need to be, right?
Okay.
I think we stay very product and very rational. I think Salesforce are probably the company I think of as doing the most distinctive B2B work. I just don't think there's a coherent narrative there. The one thing that I've always liked in terms of B2B comms, though, and my favorite ad of all time, is Salesforce have this incredible chart of their share of CRM. It may be made up, I don't know. But it's literally just a line chart with their kind of, CRM share is like 40%, and everyone else is down here.
Long
like
tail.
Shithouse, Adobe, and everyone's down here, right? And they all have like 4 or 5%, and Salesforce has 40%. And they've literally been measuring this for 10 years, and they, every 6 months, update it and put it out as a print ad, an outdoor ad, a digital ad. And I love it because the story is just relentless, which is, if you're with Salesforce, and if their numbers are true, 40% of the clients are, you feel fucking great because look, there we are, we're with the big market leader. And if you're not, you get this relentless punch in the balls, which is you're buying your CRM from a loser company. And they haven't changed it, they just update it. And I think it's a brilliant, relentless story about, well, I'm telling you why we're the best. You can infer those reasons. but we're clearly the best because we have this and everyone else has that. And the simplicity of that and the fact they haven't changed it is something I really admire.
Awesome. I think that's a brilliant example. Last question from me. What excites you most about storytelling this year?
So I think we're in a place where we may be able to create these grand narratives again that bring everyone together. And I'm a big fan of what I call two-speed targeting. I was just looking at Tesco in the UK, the British supermarket, have been able to do these kind of two different types of story. So about half their budget has gone on big brand emotional stuff aimed at everyone.
Yep.
And there ain't no discussion of anything other than Tesco's helpful and, adding value, emotion, distinctiveness. Remember Tesco. The other half has been sliced up to slightly more actionable segments, and it's about pushing this kind of menu, this kind of product, this kind of thing to a certain group of customers. And I think the idea of telling an overall mass story to everyone, but then going in at smaller groups for kind of activation with a particular product message. I really like that. It's not easy to pull off, but I think there's potential in that. And I think there's a real excitement about maybe we can look at long form storytelling with emotion and shorter, more snappy stories just for products.
Sage advice as always. Mark, thank you so much for coming and having a chat to us. Good luck this afternoon with your session,
Thanks, mate.
and we look forward to having you again.
Right, let's get the beers in.